Yo, what is good, all of you beautiful people out there? How are y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the channel. As you can see, a little bit something different today. This is not the usual weekly podcast sort of thing that we've been doing. This is going to be a little different. This is going to be a little bit of an insight to what the off-season is going to look like for us, and that is going to be our first mock draft of the 2024 off-season for the National Football League, kicking off draft season officially for us. For me, this is always my favorite time of the year. I've absolutely been in love with the draft process, and these are always so much fun to do. Talking about players, evaluating players, going into where you might project them to go. Some might think this might be a little too early, but hey, never too early to talk about mock drafts, in my opinion. Before we get into it, as always, if you'd like to, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you like this kind of content or know anybody that would enjoy this type of content that we are doing. Helps boost the channel, get us out to more viewers, so if you've not done so already and you'd like to, that'd be greatly appreciated. And also, as always, support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. The link to that will be in the description down below. But let's get on with it. So, first off, let's just go straight into it. First off is the Chicago Bears, number 1 overall. This has been a big topic of conversation ever since the Carolina Panthers clinched this spot for Chicago. Obviously, the Bears got this pick from the Bryce Young trade with the Carolina Panthers last year, after the Panthers completely shit the bed this year with one of the worst rosters I think I've ever seen a pro football team have. And as a result of that, the Bears have been blessed with the number 1 overall pick for back-to-back seasons. And unlike last year, I don't think they're trading this spot. I know there's been a lot of conversation because of Justin Fields. Yes, he did show a little bit of growth, especially in the latter half of the season, but ultimately I don't think he showed enough to solidify his spot in Chicago. I think it's a situation where he's better off being traded somewhere else, getting a new start with another organization that is not Chicago. I know some people are still speculating that because they chose not to fire Matt Eberflus, who coached his ass off and rightfully was allowed to keep his job going into next year, but they will definitely be keeping a close eye on Eberflus. And this is a situation where, hey, they got this spot while not even having to deliberately tank to get it. And they got this spot. Questions still about Justin Fields. They got this spot for one guy and one guy only, and that is Caleb Williams. I know some people are saying trade the pick, go get a guy later down the line, because I see a lot of Bears fans that are like, but what if he becomes a bust? What if Caleb Williams becomes a bust? And that absolutely can happen. There's no such thing as a guaranteed selection when you make these kind of picks, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. But you watch Caleb Williams at USC, even during the short time he was at Oklahoma, it is very clear why there's been so much hype around Caleb Williams for the past 2-3 years. Because you watch him play and the ability he has and the plays he's able to make, it's not hard to see why he was getting Patrick Mahomes comps. And it's ironic that the Chicago Bears, a team that notoriously took Mitchell Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes, granted we didn't know what Mahomes would become, but still, that selection has haunted this franchise. They have a chance to rectify that now with Caleb Williams sitting right there in their lap, and it's going to be a really good situation for them, especially considering what the pick we're going to make for them at pick 9, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But that makes the next selection, and number 2 for Washington, even easier with Drake May. That's really been the conversation all year. It's pretty clear who the top 2 quarterbacks were. Caleb Williams, Drake May out of North Carolina. And May is kind of in the same mold as Williams. I haven't finished watching the tape on these guys yet. I will make periodic videos throughout the season, throughout the off season. That is, talking about these guys and talking about these position groups. But as of right now, it is pretty clear cut and dry that these guys are going 1 and 2. Now pick 3 for New England. Never thought I'd see this team picking this high. This is where this gets interesting. There is a few different routes they can take here. You can either take Jayden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner from LSU, and rebuild this new era of Patriots football with a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach. Or you can draft Marvin Harrison, who is, even despite Caleb Williams and Drake May being here, is still, in my opinion, the best overall player in the class, and draft Marvin at 3 and take a quarterback at the top of the second round because they have the 34th overall pick, which is the second pick of the second round, where you're probably going to most likely get guys like Penix and McCarthy, or at least be in range for those guys. It's really a situation because New England is such in a specific spot roster-wise where one pick here is not going to fix all of their problems, because it's, if you take a quarterback here, then you have the question of, all right, well, who's he going to throw the ball to? And if you draft Marv, then the question is, all right, well, who's throwing him the ball? Regardless of who you take, there's going to be that other half of it. But this team is in a rebuild. This team's hitting the reset button. I think the best way to do that is drafting a rookie quarterback, and Jayden Daniels definitely fits that mold. I mean, you watched him at LSU, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it was like watching college Lamar Jackson. You know, his ability with his legs is absolutely incredible to watch, and he's also not terrible as a passer either. He's actually a really good thrower of the ball. He has a very great ability to be a great in-game learner, which is something you don't ever really see out of quarterbacks coming out of college, is their ability to, if they make a mistake, put that in the back of their mind, be like, all right, not doing that again. And then he learns as the game goes on, and that makes him a better quarterback. And that is something you have to be really excited about if you're getting that out of a rookie. So ultimately, it's going to be an interesting decision come draft day. And we might still not fully know, but ultimately I do think they're going to draft Jayden Daniels. And that makes number 4 just that much easier. Marvin Harrison. Us football fans, we've been screaming from the mountaintops to make sure Marvin Harrison Jr. becomes an Arizona Cardinal. Give Kyler Murray a true, legit number 1 threat that he hasn't had since the prime years of DeAndre Hopkins, which granted wasn't that long ago, but still, this is a Cardinals team that came into the season with the worst roster in the NFL on paper. Talks about what Kyler Murray was going to be like. He came back and reminded us why he got that big money in the first place from the Cardinals, and you need to put excitement back into this team, hope for this rebuild going forward, because they have something good going here. And Marvin Harrison is just the perfect piece for that. He might be the closest thing to a perfect college prospect we have ever seen coming out. So Marvin Harrison feels like a penciled-in position, assuming New England doesn't snatch him from their grasp. But now we get to the LA Chargers. And there was a lot of excitement about the Chargers, especially considering they just hired Jim Harbaugh. But just yesterday, they made the announcement that they were hiring Greg Roman as their offensive coordinator, and that's kind of put a bit of a damper on the excitement around the Chargers going into the offseason and going into next year. But with that aside, I mean, they have to get more weapons in the passing game. Keenan Allen's getting up there in age. Mike Williams, I believe, is a free agent. Austin Eckler has kind of had a bit of a regression over this past season, so they just need more weapons. And a name I saw circling around that's a big favorite for this team is Malik Neighbors. But I thought about it, and when you think about the great Chargers teams of the 21st century, a big piece of that, and also when it comes to Greg Roman's offense back in Baltimore, the main target in that offense was Mark Andrews. So why not get your own Mark Andrews for Justin Herbert and draft Brock Bowers, who the main thing about Brock Bowers is talent-wise, he's a top 5 player in the class, but it's a matter of because of his position and the positional value that comes with that, people had a hard time projecting where is he going to go. I think the Chargers is a perfect landing spot for him. I think Justin Herbert is absolutely going to love having a guy like Brock Bowers, who everyone knows, like, when it comes to quarterbacks, a tight end is a quarterback's best friend. They're the security blanket. They're the guy that you rely on in critical down situations most of the time if you got a great one. And Brock Bowers is an incredible playmaker, arguably a top 3 playmaker in this class. So that's going to be a great spot for him. And now that means the Giants at 6, and Malik Nabers was just handed to them on a silver platter. You know, this is a team in the receiver room that just, they have nothing. I mean, they have Darius Slayton, who's still hanging on by a thread. But other than that, like, Darren Waller just was not the guy they expected. Isaiah Hodgins looked like he was going to be something towards the end of 2022, but just was not able to do anything this year. And yeah, this is just a completely talent-devoid group. I mean, you got Wan'Dale Robinson, but he's a slot gadget guy. They really need a big-body ball winner on the outside and a big playmaker, and Malik Nabers absolutely fits the billing. And if this was any other year, Malik Nabers would be the number 1 receiver in the class by a mile. And he's and he's in a situation where he's arguably the second best behind Marvin Harrison, which tells you a lot about this receiver class this year. This is an incredibly deep receiving class, and Malik Nabers would be a perfect pick at pick 6 for the New York Giants. Which means pick number 7, so far, these teams in the top 10, if it happened in real life, the board would fall in the perfect way for all these teams. Because the Tennessee Titans, what's the biggest thing that the Titans have dealt with for the past year and a half? Their offensive line is terrible. It's one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. And they drafted Peter Skoronski last year in the first round. And I know teams, or rather fans, don't like it when their teams pick the same position in back-to-back years in the first round. But this is different when you have a guy like Joe Alt sitting right there. You know, they just need some tackles. They need somebody to protect Will Levis's blind side, especially considering it looks like they're trying to make him the guy. They need to build up this line. And, you know, it's a decent enough tackle class, it's a really good tackle class, a decent enough interior line class. They have a chance to really fix this whole unit in one draft, and kicking that off with Joe Alt is the perfect way to do that. Now the Atlanta Falcons. This is a bit of a difficult one because I definitely am looking defense for them, and I know, you know, Arthur Smith and that regime has kind of, you know, conditioned Falcons fans into taking the best player available. So, like, if this was Arthur Smith's regime, Rome Odunze would be the pick here. But this, I feel like, is a smarter regime with Raheem Morris coming in as the head coach now. And they need some pass rushers. They need some pass rush help desperately. And the best guy that I've heard around is Dallas Turner. I heard a lot, you know, there's a bit of a debate between Turner and Jared Verse out of Florida State. I haven't really gotten into either guy yet, but Turner is the higher rated guy. He's a guy that I kind of heard about first before Jared Verse. So ultimately I just decided, hey, Dallas Turner. Based on what I heard, you can't really go wrong with either. But yeah, there you go. Dallas Turner to Atlanta. Now we get to Chicago once again at pick 9. This is Chicago's original pick. And you draft Caleb Williams, number 1. I mean, what better way to pair that up than with drafting Rome Odunze? I mean, Odunze lit it up at Washington this past year. And his skill set is very interesting. Based on what I've heard, he's not really a super explosive receiver, but he is a guy that is seemingly a perfect number 2 to a guy like DJ Moore. DJ Moore is a legit number 1, and Rome Odunze would just kind of slide in and be the perfect number 2 guy who can fill number 1 roles in case DJ Moore goes down, a la Jordan Addison for the Minnesota Vikings. But yeah, I talked about how Caleb Williams is going to be going into a good situation. A lot of that has to do with what they do at pick 9. And having Caleb Williams go into a situation year 1 with Shane Waldron as his new offensive coordinator and your top 2 targets being DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, I think that's a pretty good situation for Caleb Williams, especially considering that was the one thing him and his camp were apparently bitching about for most of the year last year. And now the New York Jets at number 10. Tackle. You got to keep Aaron Rodgers upright. He's coming back. He's going to be 40 years old, coming off a torn Achilles that he tried to speed through. So you need to keep him upright at all costs. And the question is, what tackle do you go with? And the debate here is Olu Fashanu versus Talise Fuaga. And ultimately, I decided on Fuaga. You know, Talise Fuaga is a guy I heard about before the Senior Bowl this past week. By the way, the Senior Bowl is a phrase you're going to hear a lot in this video because most of the guys that are going to be in this mock draft are guys that attended the Senior Bowl. And Fuaga was a guy that I heard was getting a lot of hype, and you watched him, and it's not hard to see why. You know, he was, especially on that first day, he was stonewalling dudes. You know, he's really big guy, but has really nice footwork for a guy of his size. And he's one of these tackles where he gets his hands on you, and he's able to mirror really relatively well. Did lose a couple times throughout the week, but ultimately, he did look really, really impressive and showed why he was getting first-round hype. And ultimately, I just decided to go with Fuaga because I feel like he might have a bit of a higher upside. Olu might have the bigger or the higher floor, but I think Fuaga, if developed properly, can be definitely have a higher ceiling than Fashanu, in my opinion, at this point in time. Now we get to the Minnesota Vikings at pick 11. And this is a interesting spot because this is a team that is probably going to be looking for a quarterback because we don't know what's going to be going on with Kirk Cousins. They might bring him back. Did they let him walk? We don't know yet. We have no idea what the plan for Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings is going to be. And that's a tricky thing when you do these kind of mock drafts before free agency, is free agency still a thing, so you kind of have to wait and see because there's a lot of roster spots or a lot of holes on these rosters that usually get filled in free agency, and we kind of get a better understanding of what their direction towards the draft is going to be. But, you know, I heard about they're a team that's definitely looking for a quarterback, potentially in the first round, and Bo Nix would be a really nice spot here. But assuming they keep Kirk, or they just choose that a quarterback at this point outside of the top 3 is not worth taking 11th overall, we need to look at the other side of the ball on defense, and they need pass rush help desperately. They have a bunch of guys that are set to be free agents. So as a result, Jared Verse, come on down. Now, he was a guy that I heard a lot of people were shocked that he didn't come out last year because he was getting first-round hype for last year's draft in 2023 and goes back to Florida State and kills it again, comes back, and he's getting the same kind of hype as he was last year. And for a Vikings team that desperately needs pass rush help, Jared Verse would be a really nice pick for them at pick 11. And now, Denver at 12. I'm not going to waste my time here. Bo Nix, you are a Denver Bronco. I mean, Sean Payton can't wait to get rid of Russ any fucking faster. It was abundantly clear for most of the season that Sean Payton did not like Russ. He didn't like Russ for his offensive system. And he wants a young guy, a young quarterback that he can come in and kind of mold into that system, into the quarterback that Sean Payton is looking for. And Bo Nix is really, outside of the top three, the only guy at the moment that I view as like a true first round caliber quarterback. Everybody outside of Bo Nix is like teetering, like fringe first round guy, but most likely probably day two guys. Bo Nix is outside of the top three, a true first round guy in my opinion. Guy that's felt like he was in college for 7 years. From Auburn, then he transferred to Oregon, where he really came into his own and worked his way into the first round. It would not shock me at all if we come to draft time and Bo Nix ends up being a Denver Bronco. Would not be surprising whatsoever. And then the Las Vegas Raiders nearly said Oakland Raiders at pick 13. Look, Jermaine Illuminor, not only is he set to be a free agent, but he's also getting up there in age anyway. And they need a really good tackle duo opposite of what's his name, Colton Miller. So Olu Fashanu is the pick here for me. You could argue a quarterback, but I don't know if Michael Penix is worth the 13th overall pick. I know he was a Heisman finalist. I know he made it to the national championship. And I know Daniel Jeremiah just is obsessed over his massive hands, which, by the way, just in case you haven't seen it, look at this shit. It is fucking massive. It is insane how huge this fucker's hands are. But based on what I've heard, it doesn't sound like the league, the NFL, views Penix as a true first-round guy. It sounds like they view him as much more of like a top-of-the-second, true second-round guy. And I want to be semi-realistic about this. So, Olu Fashanu, I think the fall, or the slide rather, stops here for the Raiders, and they get a really good tackle duo. And the Raiders are a team, as far as quarterback goes, that they might draft one later on in this draft, or maybe just look ahead to free agency, or maybe even look to next year in 2024 and hope they get guys like Ewers or Shedeur Sanders or whoever, because Aiden O'Connell is not the guy going forward, in my opinion, not even close. But yeah, there's Olu to the Raiders, and now we get to the New Orleans Saints, and this is a hard one, because there's not really any guys here that I truly love, and at least for the Saints, rather, and I don't like, it's not that I don't want to take a quarterback for them, but it's also the New Orleans Saints have basically flat out said they're committing to Derek Carr for at least another 2 years, which I still don't understand what the point of that is. So I'm going to say, based on what I've heard come out of their camp as regards to Trevor Penning, there have been reports and rumors saying that the Saints are probably going to move off of Trevor Penning, their first round pick a couple years ago. So we're going to take the best tackle available for them and draft J.C. Latham out of Alabama, just as some kind of piece to build the rest of the offensive line around. But yeah, New Orleans is a tricky team to try and figure out at pick 14. And then pick 15 to the Indianapolis Colts. I was looking through this, and I was looking through their team needs on Our Lads, and Kenny Moore is set to be a free agent. Even then, he has sort of been on the decline. And Gus Bradley, the defensive coordinator there in Indianapolis, comes from that Seattle 3 system. He loves his bigger corners. These big, tall, 6'2 plus corners. I mean, that was the whole precedent behind drafting Juju Brents last year. And as a result, quote me on this, I believe, as a result of that information, that Nate Wiggins, by draft time, is going to be an Indianapolis Colt. 6'2", bordering 6'3", physical guy. I think Nate Wiggins fits the bill of what Gus Bradley dreams about, prototype-wise, in his corners. So Nate Wiggins to Indianapolis at pick 15. And then Seattle, I mean, this is another easy pick for me. Their entire interior offensive line is set to become free agents, and Jackson Powers-Johnson killed it at the Senior Bowl. He was arguably the best player, regardless of position, in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. You know, he is... It's interesting because you wouldn't expect that just looking at him. He's 6'3". They have him listed as a center, but he also played some reps at guard throughout the week as well and held up extremely well. He's 6'3", 320 pounds. He's shorter for an offensive lineman, but just completely wide and compact. He is fucking massive weight-wise, but despite that, had such great footwork for a guy that size. He's very nimble. Rarely, I don't even think he lost a rep at the Senior Bowl. And he's another one of these guys where he gets his hands on you and they're just stone. You're not going anywhere. And he was by far the biggest riser from this week. And he went from a guy that's probably going to be a second-round guy, and he just catapulted to, he's probably going in the top 20. Fuck first round, he's going in the top 20. That's how good he was for the Senior Bowl. So Jackson Powers-Johnson to Seattle, and like I mentioned earlier, they have him listed as a center. He is a center. He played center at Oregon, but he took reps at guard, and he showed that he held up incredibly well. So you can move him all across the interior on the offensive line, and he's going to be a mauler. So Jackson Powers-Johnson to Seattle, and now 17 to Jacksonville. I mean, this is a team that's going to chuck a bunch of money at Josh Allen, whether it's through the franchise tag or a long-term deal. They are not going to let Josh Allen walk out of that building. And as a result of that, that's going to let some of their other guys that might be key pieces for them out the door, including Calvin Ridley, who didn't really turn into the game breaker and the true number one wide receiver that Jacksonville was maybe hoping for. You know, he was very up and down. He had a great first week of the season against Indianapolis, and it was just kind of meh. Like, Trevor Lawrence should have had at least 10 more touchdowns this year had Calvin Ridley not dropped critical passes in the end zone. So, even despite that, they're probably going to let him walk. They need some kind of receiver help, and the best guy there is Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. Yeah, they just need somebody else in that receiver room. And, yeah, because somebody that's going to give them a boost that Calvin Ridley didn't give them. But here we go. Number 18, Cincinnati Bengals. This is another tricky team because they're probably two of their top three receivers are set to be free agents. T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Boyd's getting up there in age. They're probably going to let him walk. T. Higgins, they're probably going to end up franchise tagging him, most likely. But then you look on the defensive side, DJ Reader, one of the better nose tackles in football. He's set to be a free agent, and it would not shock me if they lost him. And they need somebody to fill that spot if they do, alongside B.J. Hill. So I'm going to go with a guy that I've heard a lot about. I haven't watched yet, but I've heard a lot about. And that's Jer'Zhan Newton out of Illinois. And they just need somebody to fill that void, that massive void of DJ Reader, if he does eventually walk. So Jer'Zhan Newton to Cincinnati. Pick 19. Now we're getting into the playoff teams. And for the first time in, 6 years? Ladies and gentlemen, the Los Angeles Rams have a first-round pick. I know, it's weird. It feels bizarre because this team has not had a first-round pick since 2016 when they drafted, what's his name, Jared Goff, number 1 overall. And this is also going to be the first first-round pick since Sean McVay has been the head coach. Let that sink in for a second. Sorry, I needed to go off on that tangent. But, to me, I'm looking at secondary help. I know some people are also looking at potential edge rushers. It would not shock me if they go that route as well. But, to me, they need some help in the secondary. They're going to have a bunch of guys becoming free agents this year. And even despite that, this is not an overtly talented unit. So, while guys like Cooper DeJean and Terrion Arnold are ranked higher, I'm going to go with a boy who was another Senior Bowl guy who absolutely showed up and showed out, and that's Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. He's a guy that ran a lot of zone coverage at Toledo, was in a very zone-heavy system, and there was questions about what he would fare going into the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl, and he showed that not only is he a good zone corner, he's also an incredible press man corner. He lost, I think, maybe one rep the entire weekend, and that was on a route against Roman Wilson where Mitchell slipped on it. Other than that, he was locked down for the entire week. He had great hip flexibility, great footwork. He showed that even though he played predominantly press in college, he can hold up incredibly well. And that shows he can be incredibly versatile no matter what system you put him in. And I firmly believe that Quinyon Mitchell could end up actually being the first corner off the board. Nate Wiggins was the first in this situation, but it would not shock me if Quinyon Mitchell does in real life end up being the first corner taken in this year's draft. And that leads us to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, in my opinion, I do think this is where I think the corner run is going to start, or truly start, rather. Cooper DeJean, fallen far enough. Cooper DeJean, you are a Pittsburgh Steeler, sir. He's a guy who, he's going to a situation where, Pittsburgh, they drafted Joey Porter Jr. at the top of the second round last year. Patrick Peterson is getting up there in age. I don't know how much longer he's going to be playing. They need some kind of help there. And Cooper DeJean is an incredible athlete out of Iowa. He's the ultra-rare white corner. I know, you don't ever really see white corners at all. In fact, they're so rare, the last time a white corner started an NFL game was Jason Sehorn back in 2004. That's how long it has been since we've seen a white corner play in the NFL on any significant scale, let alone as a starter. And Cooper DeJean is an incredible athlete, played predominantly on the outside for his last year at Iowa. He played over 600 snaps at outside corner. I know there's a lot of talks about him, whether, is he a corner, is he a safety? That snap count at outside corner shows, no, he is a true outside corner. But he does have the flexibility to play safety if asked to, but I do think he's a true outside corner, and Pittsburgh is going to love utilizing him in their defense. Now Miami at 21, and look, this is a team that they're in a situation on the offensive line where they're going to have some guys set to hit free agency, especially on their interior. So as a result, where is he? They have him listed at tackle, but I'll explain a little more why he's not just a tackle in a minute. Troy Fontenot. He was a guy that I heard was supposed to be at the Senior Bowl, but had an injury, so he couldn't go. He did play tackle at Washington. They have him listed as a tackle here, but he has guard flexibility, which that's the big weakness on the Miami Dolphin offense. Outside Tua Tagovailoa. You didn't hear it from me, but he can come in, play at guard right away, and they can also kick him outside to tackle and have him play at tackle and hold up well for the 6 games a year that Teron Armstead's going to miss because of injury. So this is a really good versatile pick for them. Troy Fontenot, 21 overall to the Miami Dolphins. Now the Philadelphia Eagles at 22 overall. Secondary is a big, big need for them. That is for sure. And there's still a lot of good corners left on the board. But when I was putting this together, I forgot Lane Johnson is getting up there in age, dude. Lane Johnson, he's debating retirement. He's been debating retirement for a while now. We don't know how much longer he's going to hold up. And, the Eagles have done this thing where they always draft guys like a year before they actually really need them. That's just kind of Howie's thing, and it's worked for them. It's, for the most part, worked out well for them. And I know he didn't have the best week at the Senior Bowl, but Jordan Morgan just feels like a good developmental guy because he had a very up and down week at the Senior Bowl, but I think have him sit a year or have him as a rotational piece, learn behind guys like Lane Johnson, go into a situation for an organization that has had great success developing offensive line talent. So yeah, I think they would really like a guy like Jordan Morgan. So that's the pick there, 22 overall. Now Houston. This is a fascinating one because offensively I think they're fine. Could they add some more high upside pieces on the offensive line? Sure. But I really think the defense is where they need to look at. And looking at this and looking at who's set to hit free agency, Jonathan Grenard is set to be a free agent this year. And I do think he's going to end up getting a bag somewhere else. I think a team's going to drastically overpay for him. And I don't think he's going to be a Houston Texan next year as a result of that. So the plan here for the Houston Texans is you traded up a lot to go get Will Anderson, third overall. He ended up having a stellar rookie season. And I really like the idea of drafting 2 young edge rushers to build around on the defensive line and not have to worry about that going forward. And as a result, I would really like to see Laiatu Latu going to the Houston Texans. Now, Latu, another Senior Bowl guy, who on day one, I didn't get the hype on him because he had hype coming in as like a top 15, maybe even top 10 player. That's the way people were talking about Latu. I didn't see it that first day. But as the week progressed, I started to understand why he was getting like legit first round, top end of the first round hype. And a large part of that is because his ability to counter and always have an answer for when his first move doesn't work really is something special. He did that throughout the week where he would go up, perform one move, wouldn't work, and then in a split second, without even thinking about it, immediately goes into another counter and wins the rep. He did that constantly throughout the week, and it really was something special to watch, and you understand why he's getting all that hype. And I really like the idea of DeMeco Ryans getting his hands on a guy like Laiatu Latu, him on one side, Will Anderson on another side. That could be a really fun edge duo for a team that's rebuilding and rebuilding fast. Now the Dallas Cowboys at pick 24. Look, Tyron Smith can't play forever, dude. He can't play forever. And I'm sorry, I saw this from another Senior Bowl guy, and just watching him out there, Tyler Guyton just feels like a Dallas Cowboy. Tyler Guyton, to me, just screams future Dallas Cowboy in every sense of the word. He's an incredibly athletic tackle, really great athlete. Not the biggest guy as far as, like, when I saw him at first, he did look like on the bit of the slender side, but really athletic, really good footwork, nasty as all hell, incredibly competitive. That was the big takeaway from Tyler Guyton at the Senior Bowl was he just got fired up after every fucking rep he did. He was high-fiving dudes. He was talking shit. He nearly took off a coach's hand. He slapped it so hard. And you love to see that in a player, especially in an offensive lineman. Though he is a bit raw in certain aspects, he doesn't have the greatest hand placement. You know, there are a lot of times where he just kind of like grabs onto the back of guys' shoulder pads instead of getting him right under his shoulder plate. But Dallas has had a great history of developing offensive linemen, and I think Tyler Guyton is going to be a really good pick there. And like I said, he just screams future Dallas Cowboy in every sense of the word. And then the Green Bay Packers, I mean, safety is their biggest need, but this does not look like it's a good safety class at all. But secondary in general is something they need to address. And to just go with the best corner available, and that's Terrion Arnold. I've heard his name around a lot, haven't gone into him yet, so I can't really form an opinion on him. I have heard good things about him. I've heard that he could potentially be CB1 in this class. So he's a guy that I'll keep my eye on, but right now, 25 to the Green Bay Packers goes Terrion Arnold. Now the Tampa Bay Bucks at 26. This was by far the hardest selection to make because this team doesn't have any real true needs. Like, yeah, they have guys set to hit free agency, but they're either guys that you feel confident that they're going to be able to retain, and even if they didn't, they have younger guys behind them that they feel comfortable with rocking with for the future. So ultimately, I just decided to give them the best edge rusher available, and that's Braylon Trice out of Washington. Don't really have an opinion on Trice just yet because I don't really know anything about him, but you know, there's a team that they believe Yaya Diaby can be the guy going forward on the edge for them, but you can never have too much edge depth, so Trice to Tampa Bay. This one's a little more easy, though, because the Cardinals, with 2 first-round picks, I mean, they wanted 2 things in this first round. They wanted Marvin Harrison Jr., and they wanted a corner. And guess what? There's some corners available, and Kool-Aid McKinstry is the best one available out of Alabama. Heard he's a really feisty dude, and I'm excited to get into the tape of him when I eventually do. But yeah, they really needed a corner. They don't have a whole lot of help in the secondary, and Kool-Aid McKinstry could be a really nice pick for them that late at pick 27. And then the Buffalo Bills at 28, I mean, pick whatever receiver you like. Best one available is Troy Franklin. They just need somebody else in that receiver room. Stephon Diggs, he only had, was a 100-yard game the entire season, and that was in week 2. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if he's not a Bill within 2 years. And then Gabe Davis, you know, everyone's still trying to hope that Gabe Davis can take the leap into being a true number 2. And there will be like a couple game stretch where he looks like he's that, and then he'll just disappear for the next couple games after that. So they just need somebody else in that receiver room that can win on the outside, and that's where the selection of Troy Franklin comes in. And now pick 29 to the Detroit Lions. Corner, just secondary in general. You know, this is a pass defense that you can argue cost this team games, potentially even cost them the season in the NFC title game. They just need the best corner available right now. And thankfully for them, Enos Rakstra is a guy that, based on the things I've heard about him, a guy who's a great tackler, a fierce tackler, a physical guy, can be a bit grabby at times, but really physical player that loves contact. I mean, that just sounds like a Dan Campbell corner if I ever heard one. So yeah, that just feels like a great pick for Detroit that late. And then Baltimore, Byron Murphy, come on down, baby. I mean, you look at their depth chart. Out of their 4 starting defensive linemen, 3 of them are set to hit free agency. Michael Pierce is the only one that's on that starting defensive line that's not a free agent this year. And then you talk about Justin Madubuike, who I think they're going to be able to retain him, but it would not shock me if he ends up leaving and gets a huge bag somewhere else. So they need help on that defensive line as a result of that because of the guys. They're not going to be able to keep all of them. And Byron Murphy, he was a guy, again, was supposed to be at the Senior Bowl, but ended up opting out, which is disappointing because I really wanted to see him. But yeah, Byron Murphy to the Baltimore Ravens, going to a really defensive line needy team. That's a really good pickup for them. And then the Kansas City Chiefs, best wide receiver available, and Ladd McConkey, I know for a fact, if this happened in real life, Ladd McConkey would eat as a Kansas City Chief. And he was a guy who, you know, every single year there's always that one guy from the receiver group that, you know, people just kind of fall in love with these Senior Bowl guys. You know, like for me in 2021, it was Calvin Austin, or 2022 rather, it was Calvin Austin. And then last year, it was Jaden Reed. This year, that guy for me is Ladd McConkey. You know, another one of these white slot receivers who's a good route runner. Except Ladd McConkey is not a good route runner. He's a phenomenal route runner. He was torching guys from the first day onward. He was putting guys in a spin cycle constantly with his footwork and his route running ability, and has great hands on top of that. And for a Chiefs team that, yes, they're in the Super Bowl, yes, they're in a good spot where they could probably win it, you got to have somebody else in the receiving room outside of just Rashee Rice and just Travis Kelce in the receiving game. You need somebody that can be a good route runner, be a great, reliable target in the receiving game. Ladd McConkey can absolutely be that guy for them. And that finally brings us to the San Francisco 49ers, pick 32. I kind of said this at the start of the season when I did my season previews for all the teams. The San Francisco 49ers, outside of Trent Williams, do not have that great of an offensive line. It really is a situation of if Trent Williams goes down, the whole thing kind of crumbles. So, best tackle available, Armias Mims. Again, another guy I don't really know much about, but best tackle available, just go straight for him. And that, ladies and gentlemen, as we wait for this to show it again. There we are. All right, that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. Mock Draft 1.0 in the books. This is going to be kind of the theme throughout the rest of the offseason leading up to April's draft. Really excited about it. And if you guys are interested or know anybody who'd be interested in it, send them on over. It's going to be a lot of fun talking about these guys. And that is going to put a wrap on the video. If you've not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video. And also, if you want to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. But with that being said, I am Double Diesel. Peace.